My name is Job Murezi. I work for Hivos as Global Planning, Monitoring, Evaluation and Learning, commonly known as PMEL. In addition to that, I also support other programs in Hivos in terms of monitoring, evaluation and learning. So particularly for this program that I support, it's called the Voices for Just Climate Action. It's implemented in 7 countries in Latin America, Asia and Africa. And particularly for Hivos, we implement in 5 countries. That is Brazil, Indonesia, Tunisia, Kenya, and Zambia. For me, monitoring and evaluation for such programs is very key for us to identify progress that we are making, documenting the lessons that we are also gathering, and use these lessons to improve on implementation. And therefore, for such programs, such climate justice programs, it is critical to adopt or employ methodologies that are dynamic for monitoring purposes, because these programs are not very linear. There are a couple of factors that interact that can have an influence into the direction of the program. And because we need to identify the changes that are taking place and also identify our contribution to these changes, and also identify how these changes are all in all affecting the outcomes that we are trying to achieve. Monitoring methodologies such as outcome harvesting come in handy because, as the founder of the methodology, Wilson, said, outcome harvesting is a superior methodology in terms of its dynamism, and especially in situations where social change is not fully understood. And therefore, outcome harvesting can help us learn, adapt our methodologies so that we can, and interventions so that we can be able to achieve greater impact. In terms of evaluation, the evaluation part of monitoring, evaluation and learning, there is also the aspect of adopting methodologies that are also very, can be effective in measuring or assessing how change has actually happened and identify areas of further improvement. And currently, we are at the very last year of implementation of the Voices for Just Climate Action program. And we already did a baseline at the beginning, and we did midterm evaluation in the middle, 2023. So we are now preparing for the final evaluation that is going to take place later this year and early next year. And of course, for such programs, the guiding criteria for identifying the best methodology in evaluation is usually guided by OECD DAC criteria because it's a European Union country that is funding this particular program. But also in addition to that, you also need to look at what the donor expects from evaluations. And because the donor for this particular program is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Netherlands, they have a department where they advise on evaluations and the standard criteria for these. And these ones are called the IUB criteria, where they specify exactly how world-class evaluations should be conducted as per these particular guidelines. So we are taking keen interest to review these sufficiently so that we ensure that we are taking note of what we need to do properly and timely to ensure that the final evaluation meets world-class standards, so that we can be able to gather the most in terms of learning and lessons and how to improve, not only for us to inform our future maybe proposals or funding, but also like to inform even the other programs in the climate space, how best to implement those programs. So we are really looking forward to this. And also, just to mention that also the Voices for Just Climate Action is a very innovative grant. And for this, we are also piloting a small grant mechanism called the Next Level Grant Facility, where we are funding the informal, the organizations that are not usually funded through by conventional donors. So the VCA has developed this small grant. It's implemented in the countries that you work in. And we're also working as the M&D team, we're also working to develop the M&D system for this grant. Because it's very innovative, it can redefine how donors work with small organizations, especially those working in the climate space. And therefore, we are trying to gather as much lessons as possible through monitoring data and also trying to inform the learning agenda for the next level grant facility, commonly known as the NLGF. Yeah, we're looking forward to great results as will be identified in the evaluation that is going to take place, and we're sure the critical lessons that we've learned in the Voices for Just Climate Action will be valuable in informing and better programming for future climate justice programs such as this one. For programs such as these complex programs that we work to implement, such as the one we work with, the Voices for Just Climate Action, methodologies such as theory of change come in handy, approaches actually come in handy in terms of designing the program. And the theory of change is very appropriate in this case because it ideally should be like a living document that you always update through regular monitoring, through the data that you collect on a regular basis, the lessons that you're gathering, the assumptions that you're reviewing. If any of these things change, should be discussed, and the theory of change can be refined to better be responsive, to be more responsive to the current realities of the program. So for the Voices for Just Climate Action, the theory of change was developed, and we are pleased to note that even during the midterm evaluation, the major finding for the midterm evaluation that was conducted was that the theory of change for Voices for Just Climate Action is valid. The only issue with it was that the three pillars that are there more or less were interconnected, maybe a bit too much, such that when you're doing reporting and basing it on the pillars of change, you're likely to replicate the reporting of the results. But in terms of the content and the applicability, in the first half of the program, it was found to be really representative of the lived realities and the space that the program is being implemented in. So in brief, the theory of change has, for the Voices for Just Climate Action, has three main pillars. The first one is about mutual capacity strengthening, in recognition that the different partners, the alliance members and the different partners who are implementing the program need to have adequate capacity to ensure that they're able to implement the program in the best way possible. The second pillar is about agenda setting, and we know like the climate space is a very emerging field and dynamic. There are usually very different issues that come up every day, and therefore we recognize that as a program we have to be on the forefront in setting the agenda for climate interventions. And more particularly because if we look at all the countries where our program is being implemented are sort of what we call, in quotes, developing countries in the global south. And we feel the most effects of climate change despite contributing the least to them. And therefore we have to be on the forefront in terms of setting the agenda for how climate change interventions, including adaptation, mitigation, funding, and things like that, are designed and are implemented to reflect the local realities of the citizens who live in the global south. And thirdly, joint lobbying and advocacy. And we also, in this space, we recognize that we also have a key role to play in terms of advocating for issues that affect locals because they are mostly affected by climate change issues. And therefore, their voices have to be brought to the table in terms of these discussions. Of course, we work to ensure that the marginalized and minoritized groups, such as youth, women, gender-expansive persons, indigenous people, and so on, who have been left behind in these conversations, have a say in terms of how climate justice interventions are implemented, designed, implemented actually, and evaluated. So those are the three pillars that form the theory of change for the Voices for Just Climate Action.